Discover the incredible hidden journey of the Underworld, 7 surprising transformations revealed. Sarah slumped against a stack of aging encyclopedias, the smell of must and decay wrapping around her like a shroud. She stared out the dusty window of the cramped library basement, droplets of rain racing each other down the glass, much like the dreams she once had, quick, fleeting, and inevitably washed away. Once a rising star in academia, she had envisioned herself reshaping the academic landscape with her groundbreaking research. Now, mere months after her mentor's death and a sudden layoff, she found herself alone in a forgotten corner, surrounded by droves of overdue finds and tales of forgotten heroes. A flicker of anger surged as she thought of her past, the brilliance she felt when presenting her findings to eager students. Each applause felt like a promise, a reminder that she was meant for something significant. Yet now, all that remained was the heavy weight of self-doubt transformed into a pitiful reality. Days turned into weeks as she sorted through endless piles of outdated books, each one symbolizing a part of herself that felt just as damned to obscurity, should she still believe she could make an impact. She felt an internal pull, a dichotomy of desires swirling within her. One part craved to resurrect the passion of her youth, to show the world her worth, the other part clung tightly to the narrative of failure, whispering that perhaps she was never meant to soar. A shiver ran down her spine as she recalled the dismissive remarks from former colleagues, criticisms that echoed now in her mind. None had expected her to succeed after her mentor's passing, none had seen the spark that still flickered however dimly within her. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Returning to her sorting, she stumbled upon something buried beneath the detritus, a manuscript, its cover worn yet intriguing. Dust danced under the dim light as she pulled it free, a wave of curiosity cresting. The title, faded but legible, spoke of daring women in times when society rendered them voiceless. With each turn of the yellowed pages, Sarah felt renewed anguish clashing against burgeoning hope. Who were these women? Their stories felt heavy yet liberating, urging her to reclaim her voice. But the weight of expectations loomed larger with each revelation. What if she didn't measure up? What if her ancestors who shattered ceilings laughed at her mediocrity? The deeper she delved, the more she wrestled with the shadows of her doubts. A series of images flickered in her mind, hushed conversations of her colleagues, their mocking looks, and the chilling realization that their doubts mirrored the chains on her ancestors. They had stepped out boldly, while she hesitated at each opportunity, haunted by the specter of inadequacy. As despair curled around her heart, a new determination sparked. She must confront not only her past but also what history refused to acknowledge about both her family and herself. The challenge loomed, daunting yet thrilling. This ancestral connection could transform her narrative, but was she ready to embrace such an immense burden? With her heart racing and muscles tense, Sarah faced the sultry promise of discovery, knowing her story was a tapestry waiting to be woven. Yet, as the clouds darkened outside, one question hung in the air: would she find the courage to claim her narrative, or would this unravel under the weight of fear? The manuscript lay open, an invitation and a challenge beckoning her into uncertainty. As the rain poured heavier outside, the pressure of decision loomed. This journey had only just begun, but the road ahead felt perilous, and Sarah stood at its edge, ready to confront what she had always been afraid to discover. As the rain intensified, each droplet felt like a personal lament, striking the glass with a rhythmic insistence, much like the mounting pressure within Sarah's chest. The manuscript lay open on her lap, its pages almost whispering to her, taunting, enticing. These women's stories were filled with trials, fear, and ultimately, defiance, illuminating her path forward, yet highlighting her own stagnation. The contrast was stark, and she felt herself wrestling with an urgent question: what legacy did she want to leave behind? Determinedly, she pushed her lingering insecurity aside and focused on the task at hand. She had to extract narratives from historical figures who had fought against their circumstances. They were her lifeline. The passion that had long been dormant began to flicker anew within her. Sarah suddenly felt the potential repercussions of this decision breaking through her shell of self-doubt. What if facing her history did lead to an exploration of her identity, her family legacy? Hadn't he, her mentor, the late Dr. Cordelia Hayes, always urged her to look beyond the confines of what was acceptable? Sarah pulled out a conspicuously blank journal, its pages untouched, and she grabbed her pen with renewed vigor. The initial strokes felt clumsy, as if she were learning to write all over again, yet each word began to solidify her thoughts. As she scrunched the manuscript's pages to find a clean area, snippets of inspiration flowed. The women she read about had defied and redefined their circumstances through sheer force of will. What could she document that would echo their strength? Her pen moved faster, hastily outlining a framework for her first scholarly article, one that would not only engage with history's valiant women but would also explore her own identity. As the ink flowed, so did a cascade of questions. What would her peers think? More importantly, would this be enough? The nagging voice of doubt crept back, whispering insidiously, creating mental obstacles to derail her progress. In that moment of vulnerability, she stood on the precipice of something monumental, a decision to believe in herself amidst the noise of her insecurities. Time slipped by unnoticed as her thoughts merged into a plan. She decided to reach out to a few old friends in academia, perhaps organizing a small discussion group centered on the intersections of historical narratives and personal legacies. What could start as a simple meeting could blossom into something far more impactful, a chance to explore shared doubts, but also a step towards collaboration that could shine a light on individual struggles and breakthroughs. Yet as excitement rose, so did the looming distraction of her past, those faces that once glared at her in skepticism. The betrayal she felt from former colleagues still stung, and their criticisms echoed in her mind, creating a mental barrier she would have to dismantle. The fear of exposure intensified, a reminder that breaking out of silence meant risking vulnerability. How could she face them again? Present herself as a credible voice and not just a casualty of circumstance? Confrontation loomed in her mind, an inevitable reckoning with both her past and her future. With every word she penned, she felt as though she was not only reclaiming her story, but also preparing to challenge the narrative imposed upon her. Still, she understood this was just the beginning of what could potentially spiral into chaos. As she exposed her vulnerabilities, the rain subsided to a gentle patter, but the storm within her remained tumultuous. Sarah took a deep breath, clutching her pen tightly, all too aware that the moment of truth was fast approaching. Would she share her new work with the world, or hide behind the safety of her basement sanctuary, allowing fear to dictate her future? The heart of her journey lay in her response to that very question, and she was all too aware of the dangers of indecision. A flash of resolve surged as she formed a bold plan for the following day to email her former mentor's colleagues and announce her intentions. With dread coiling around her stomach, she reveled in the thrill of potential transformation. The ink on the page represented faith in her own story, an acknowledgement of the courageous women who came before her, and she would write her narrative without hesitation. But just as the weight began to lift, her phone buzzed unexpectedly. Her heart raced as she noticed the name on the screen, an old colleague, a haunting reminder of her past failures. These fingers, once trembling in uncertainty, now hovered poised to press accept. It was time to face what lay beyond her comfort zone and deal with the fallout that awaited her. Would this encounter shatter her emerging resolve or solidify her newfound purpose? The answer was a mere breath away. The phone buzzed again, the sound cutting through her resolve like a knife. For a moment, Sarah hesitated, the familiar surge of anxiety washing over her. Memories flashed in her mind, cold shoulder glances, dismissive comments, the weight of laughter echoing in university halls. It wasn't just a name on the screen, it was a portal back to a version of herself that felt small and unnoticed. Gathering her breath, she pressed accept. The screen flickered to life, revealing Eric, a former colleague whose sharp criticisms had once held her under their thrall. "Sarah," he greeted, a mix of surprise and coolness in his tone. "Long time no see. What have you been up to?" The casual air he attempted to adopt did little to disguise the undercurrents of judgment lurking beneath the surface. She swallowed hard, mindful of her own emotions and the weight of stakes involved in this conversation. Would he elevate her to a forgotten peer or remind her of her perceived inadequacies? Just working on some new projects, she replied, a touch of defensiveness seeping into her voice that she quickly masked. You. He leaned back, feigning disinterest. The usual. Scholarly articles, you know how it goes. But I heard you were taking some time off after, well, everything. There it was, the insinuation that her career had stalled, the implication that she had been erased from the narrative. Anger sparked in her chest, fighting with her resolve. She had a choice, either succumb to the discouragement he so effortlessly presented or seize the moment to redirect the dialogue. Actually, I'm exploring a personal project that focuses on women's historical narratives writing about resilience, the stories of those who paved the way despite being overlooked. There it was, this time with conviction, as if she was crafting a new script where she was not only a participant but the lead. She noticed Eric's eyebrows rise slightly, surprise merging with something more veiled curiosity. You. Writing something meaningful? That's interesting, he said, keeping his voice neutral, yet unable to mask the surprise. I didn't know you were still into that scene. I thought it wasn't your thing anymore. Her heart raced at the defensiveness lingering in his voice, like a challenge thrown down. It is my thing, Eric. The stories we tell shape our identities, and I think it's time I contributed my own. A silence stretched between them, infused with her determination and his hesitance. She could feel the pulse of her newfound commitment pushing against the barriers of this old conversation, urging her forward. She wasn't just standing against the weight of his expectations, she was reclaiming her narrative. You always had potential, Sarah, he finally offered, the tone shifting slightly, which felt like an opening rather than an invitation to retreat. You're bold for wanting to dive back into the fray. Just remember, it's a tough world out there. Mockery mingled with an oddly sincere trace of concern in his voice, ringing hollow yet strangely familiar. In that moment, Sarah understood that this conversation wasn't just about him, it was about confronting her past while claiming her space in the future. I'm not afraid of the tough world, Eric. In fact, I embrace it. I'll uphold the legacy of those women who built their own paths. Maybe you should try writing a piece on that. With those words, she felt a shift, a cathartic release of all the self-imposed limitations. No longer was she attempting to prove something to him. She was articulating her future, drawing boundaries tighter around her own identity. Their conversation drifted into cautious territory, discussing potential collaborations, even flirting with ideas about sharing their research. Sarah felt a flicker of excitement, perhaps this wasn't the end but merely the beginning of a new chapter for both of them. As she ended the call, a deep breath allowed clarity to wash over her. There was a jagged piece of her past recalibrating into focus, but also a door opening wide to the possibilities that lay ahead. It wasn't merely the techniques of academic writing that she had to refine, it was about channeling her history into something compelling, something that would echo through time. However, doubt nagged at her mind like a whisper. Could she truly tread this precarious path? Moreover, what if pushing forward brought her face to face with even deeper conflicts, challenges she wasn't prepared to face? The next morning, she would reach out to her former mentor's colleagues and unveil her aspirations, but what awaited her in that confrontation? Would they uplift her vision or cast her aside once more? As she reflected on the potential fallout, she felt an unsettling churn, a dark tide rising. In the storm of self-affirmation, she made a key decision. She would not only embrace the complexity of her past but prepare to confront its shadows, wherever they might lead. The moment of truth awaited her, an impending collision on the horizon, one she was beginning to feel ready to meet. The morning light filtered through the curtains, casting soft patterns on the wooden floor, but Sarah felt no comfort from it. Instead, an unfamiliar mix of anticipation and trepidation coiled in her stomach. Today was not just another workday, it was a crucial step into the unknown, a leap into a space where her worth would be tested against the skepticism of past authority figures. Resolutely, she pulled on a crisp blazer, one that made her feel powerful and prepared. As she approached her former mentor's office, the anxiety transformed into a pulse of energy coursing through her veins. Each step echoed with the memory of the younger Sarah, uncertain, hesitant, and always second-guessing her position. Now she bore a different intention, one rooted in authenticity and resilience. She had something to prove, not just to her former colleagues but also to herself. Upon entering the office, the familiar sights, shelves adorned with decades of academic achievements, the scent of old books mingling with fresh coffee triggered a torrent of memories. Moments she'd felt overlooked, unworthy. But now, with each gaze, she was met with the tense gaze of her former peers, their expressions ranging from surprise to curiosity. "Sarah. Long time no see," said Beth, her former research supervisor, a mix of warmth and disbelief lighting up her features. "We heard you were focusing on writing again. What's this new project about?" This was it. Sarah inhaled, centering herself. "I've decided to explore women's history narratives. I want to delve into stories of resilience and strength that have been overlooked. I believe these narratives are crucial for empowering the next generation." An awkward silence filled the room, as if the words hung heavy in the air. She could sense their skepticism, a tension that seemed to propose whether she had the authority to speak on such matters. It pressed in around her, forcing her to confront the craving for validation buried deep within. Beth broke the silence. "Interesting approach, but it's a saturated field. Are you sure you'll add something valuable?" There was an explicit challenge hidden in her question that stung more than Sarah expected. "I'll nurture that doubt," she replied, voice steady but hard as steel, "because while the field might be saturated, the stories are infinite. And my perspective, my voice is my greatest asset. That has always been unique." As she spoke, she felt the tension ease, almost as if she was unwrapping a gift. The clarity of her purpose began to solidify. No longer was she feeling defensive, she was engaged in a dialogue, a collaboration springing to life before her eyes. The discussion turned to the technical aspects of her project. Ideas flowed, and she could see glimmers of interest forming in the eyes surrounding her. She was no longer the overlooked novice, she was a collaborator, a creative force poised to make an impact. But even as hope glimmered, a palpable fear remained. Would they actually support her or dismiss her efforts once more? The thought of potential rejection was daunting. "Sarah," Beth's tone shifted, "I think you might find it beneficial to share your ideas at the upcoming conference. Their essay panel focused on fresh voices in history, and we could push the boundaries of conventional narratives together." The offer hung in the air like a lifeline, but intertwined with uncertainty. Would they welcome my voice? She questioned internally, her excitement tinged with an echo of that old fear, the flickering shadow of doubt creeping back. But another voice within her, a stronger, bolder voice, challenged that thought. If not now, when? Gathering her resolve, she made her choice. "Yes. I'll prepare something, and I'll present. Because this is my turn to reclaim my narrative, to shape the dialogue around women's history." The moment her words settled, she felt lighter, as if a weight had lifted. This wasn't just about sharing her work, it marked a transition, a transformation into confidence. Leaving that meeting, the tension that had shadowed her earlier evaporated. She had stepped into a new realm of possibility, yet another battle awaited. As she sat in her car, the hum of the engine muted, her thoughts drifted to preparations for the conference. Who would be questioning her the hardest? Would she again face Eric's skepticism, or perhaps a new adversary who would seize upon her insecurities? The road ahead loomed like a vast landscape, both daunting and exhilarating. Sarah gripped the steering wheel, heart racing with both apprehension and excitement. The realization struck her like lightning. She was on the cusp of confronting not only external challenges but also those inner barriers that had constrained her for so long. But even amid her disbelief, an electrifying promise flared within her spirit. She was ready to take that leap and face whatever demons awaited her at the conference, no matter how daunting the outcome. The question lingered in the back of her mind as she drove onward: would this unleash her true potential, or would it expose her vulnerabilities in an unforgiving way? The next step was looming, and Sarah understood one thing clearly: there could be no turning back. The days following her decision to present at the conference blurred into an intense period of preparation. Sarah quickly developed a routine that contrasted sharply with her former lack of direction. Early mornings were now filled with research and late nights were dedicated to writing, every stroke of her keyboard a step toward reclaiming her narrative. She was no longer just a passive observer, she was a participant, crafting her own significance, yet, within this newfound focus, doubt still crept in. During moments of solitude, when the echo of a finished sentence faded, anxiety clawed at her. What if her presentation fell flat? What if the very people who had nurtured her growth were now judging her harshly? These thoughts, like tendrils of smoke, clouded her resolve. It was in those vulnerable moments that she found herself questioning the authenticity of her mission. Was she truly exploring women's history narratives because she believed in their value, or was she simply yearning for validation? Sarah often caught herself reflecting on her past experiences. She recalled the moments that made her feel insignificant. The dismissive comments of peers echoed in her mind, "You'll never break into this space," or "this isn't to your strength." Each phrase was a jagged piece of glass she would have to sift through to find strength. And each time she tidied up her notes, the sharp edges of those memories stung her motivation. One evening, as she meticulously crafted the slides for her presentation, her phone buzzed with an unexpected message from Beth. "I'd love to catch up before the conference. Let's grab coffee. I want to offer some insights." That instantly stirred both excitement and apprehension. Beth's willingness to engage felt promising, but the thought of revealing her preparatory fears struck a chord of hesitation within. Hadn't she just made the decision to move forward, to stand firmly on her own? Nevertheless, refusing to let doubt dictate her actions, Sarah agreed. As they sat together in a quaint coffee shop filled with a comforting buzz of conversation, Beth looked at her with genuine curiosity. "I know you've been working hard on your narrative," she began. "What are you most proud of so far?" The question surprised Sarah. It forced her to pause, lifting her gaze from the intricate patterns on the table. What had she truly accomplished? Within that silence, she began to deliberate in her mind, recognizing the aspects of her work that resonated deeply within her. "I'm proud of how I've embraced the stories that I once thought didn't matter. I realize each narrative has the potential to empower someone else, even if it's just one person." As the words tumbled out, she felt a shift. The weight of self-doubt that shielded her lips had begun to dissipate. It was liberating. Beth nodded, and an encouraging smile formed on her face. "That's the essence. But have you thought about how to handle potential critique? Not everyone will appreciate your approach." The question hung heavy in the space between them. The thrill of authenticity clashed with the cold reality of scrutiny. "I guess I haven't, actually." "Prepare for the worst while expecting the best," Beth suggested softly, her voice imbued with experience. In that moment of vulnerability during your presentation, you also have the option to define the conversation. Stake your ground. A conversation, Sarah echoed, rolling the term over in her brain, contemplating its weight. She embraced the notion. If she redefined her presentation as a collaborative dialogue rather than a performance, it could alter everything. Armed with this revelation, she felt empowered yet again, her fears morphing into available tools rather than inherent limitations. In the days that followed, Sarah's resolve crystallized. Each morning she viewed her reflection with a burgeoning sense of pride. She would no longer duck under scrutiny as she had in the past. Instead, her intention was to stand tall, welcoming any challenge with the confidence of someone who had identified their worth the night before. The conference, Sarah lay awake, heart pounding. A surge of adrenaline coursed through her body. This was at the moment everything she'd worked toward would either fly or falter. Closing her eyes, she took a deep breath, picturing the audience's faces. She realized that they would be a mosaic of perspectives, some encouraging, some doubtful, but all there to engage. As the reality of the event approached, anticipation bubbled within her. This was more than just about the presentation, it was a test of resilience and a chance for personal evolution. Time was slipping through her fingers, yet the potential for transformation felt tangible, igniting a fire within her. With a heavy exhale, she steeled herself for the challenge ahead. The moment she would step onto that stage loomed over her, a precipice daring her to leap. Would she rise to the occasion and redefine her narrative on her own terms, or would the fear that had haunted her past once again loom larger than her aspirations? The answer lay just within reach, waiting in the shadows of uncertainty. The moment of truth arrived, and Sarah stepped onto the stage, the spotlight blaring as her internal tumult crashed against the edges of her resolve. The audience was a patchwork of faces, some familiar and others alien, all scrutinizing her with expectations she had deemed misplaced. Anxiety surged into her throat, chilling her as she glanced down at her meticulously prepared notes. They felt heavy, shackling her with the weight of uncertainty, but then, recalling Beth's advice, she centered her thoughts. This was not merely her moment to shine, it was an opportunity to engage, to exchange ideas, to spark meaningful dialogue. She took a breath, releasing the doubts that clung to her like shadows. Sarah realized that being vulnerable was part of creating connections, and in that revelation lay her strength. She spoke with clarity, allowing her passion for women's narratives to guide her words. Each sentence was a bridge inviting her audience to explore the richness of those stories, the often ignored histories that shaped their realities. The initial tension began to dissolve into a rhythm of back and forth as she encouraged questions. Her heart beat in sync with the palpable curiosity that filled the air around her. Midway through, a voice from the back row pierced her momentum. Why should we invest in these histories? What relevance do they have now? The question was challenging, sharp and laced with skepticism. A defensive reflex stirred within her, the instinct to retreat to the safety of her notes bubbling up. But then Sarah recalled her resolve. The very essence of her project was to provoke thought. Because these stories reveal the roots of our present, she responded, her voice steadying as she leaned into the discomfort. Understanding historical narratives allows us to confront systemic inequalities that persist today. By acknowledging these stories, we empower ourselves to create change. The room seemed to shift as she spoke, an electric current pulsing through her words. That moment transformed the atmosphere around her. The audience began to lean in. Eyes widened, nods of recognition punctuated her sentences, and she sensed a palpable shift from skepticism to engagement. Sarah took a moment, scanning their faces, reluctant to miss the shift after solely focusing on her notes. The intricate dance of giving and receiving ideas filled her with newfound energy. She was no longer just presenting, she was partaking in a dialogue where her narrative intertwined with theirs. As questions turned into discussions, she embraced the unexpected depth woven between their exchanges, realizing her mission had broadened beyond mere validation. It was about sowing the seeds of understanding and possibility in others. After the presentation, people approached her with appreciation, sharing personal connections to the themes she had discussed. She hadn't just spoken of narrative, she had cultivated a community of shared understanding in that brief moment. And as they expressed their gratitude, her earlier fears shrank beneath the weight of their recognition. Each affirmation was a stepping stone toward redefining her self-worth, transforming her once brittle confidence into something steadfast. But as the excitement began to settle, doubt still lingered like a whisper in her ear. What if the impact was fleeting? What if tomorrow she slipped back into feelings of inadequacy? The applause was kind, yet her heart involuntarily raced, echoing old insecurities. Sarah. The familiar voice broke through her thoughts. It was Beth, her presence a beacon amid the afterglow of the presentation. I knew you could do it. You were incredible. The warmth in her words wrapped around Sarah, yet she found herself wrestling with remnants of uncertainty. Thanks, but I feel unsteady, she admitted, the vulnerabilities of the moment spiraling anew within her. Beth's gaze sharpened. That's normal. Growth doesn't happen overnight. Embrace it. But you've taken a massive stride today, don't underplay that. In that instant of recognition, Sarah saw the reflection of herself, not just an author presenting a narrative but a woman stepping into her agency. Still, the thought clung to her, what awaited in the days to come? The night closed down on her newfound experience, leaving tenacious questions unfurling in the depths of her thoughts. How could she carry this momentum forward when fears had resurfaced? What would her journey beyond this moment reveal about keeping the flame of confidence alive? As she looked towards the future, one thing crystallized in her mind: this was only the beginning, and she was determined to explore every layer of her evolving self. What doors would she open next, and would she dare to traverse further into the realms of her potential? The following days were a tapestry of reflection laced with anticipatory tension as Sarah juggled the exhilaration of her presentation with the haunting specter of self-doubt. The applause still hummed in her ears, but the inadequacy she had feared returned with a vengeance. Each passing encounter with her colleagues, friends, and strangers stirred a question that gnawed at her resolve: was she truly worthy of the recognition she had received? To navigate this internal turmoil, Sarah embarked on a daily ritual of journaling. Each morning, the first rays of light would pierce the stillness of her room, illuminating the pages where she dared to lay bare her thoughts. The act of writing became a cathartic exercise, as she poured her insecurities, hopes, and insights onto the paper. Gradually, she began to rediscover her voice, not merely the one she had projected on stage, but the raw, unfiltered expression locked within her. "Today, I felt small," one entry read. "That voice from the audience still echoes in my mind, questioning my purpose. It's as if every accolade comes with an ultimatum: prove yourself worthy or fade into obscurity. But what fuels my passion is the children of our past who deserve to be heard." This resolution, forged in the crucible of doubt, hardened further with each page. Sarah realized that her journey was not merely outward but also deeply inward, a quest to confront the unspoken fears that had shadowed her since childhood. Armed with her reflections, she decided to take tangible steps toward transforming her life. If her narrative could resonate with an audience, perhaps she could also illuminate her path forward. On a whim, she enrolled in a local workshop on public speaking and effective storytelling. The thought both excited and terrified her. What if she fumbled? What if her articulate moments on stage were a fluke? Yet, with each doubt, a counter-thought emerged, reminding her of the empowerment that had washed over her during the presentation. Sarah quickly made the commitment a pledge to step into discomfort with the same audacity she had mustered under the spotlight. The workshop was an electric mix of personalities, each participant driven by their own motivations and stories. The first session centered on unearthing personal narratives, a process that forced Sarah to confront the skeletons she often kept hidden, from her insecurities about her writing to her childhood memories of feeling overshadowed by peers. With each storytelling exercise, she began to weave her experiences into a coherent tapestry, revealing moments of vulnerability and resilience. One evening, as she shared a particularly painful story about a teacher who had dismissed her literary ambitions, she felt a shift not just within herself but also in the room. Her peers leaned in, eyes locked with hers, weaving in asynchronous threads of their narratives. For the first time, Sarah saw her past not as a collection of failures, but as a rich reservoir of experiences that fostered connection and empathy. The workshop culminated in a group performance piece, where each participant would share the story they had crafted. As Sarah stood backstage, waiting for her turn, the nervous energy bubbled in her core. But instead of retreating into her self-doubt, she remembered the purpose behind the stories she sought to tell: connection, vulnerability, and empowerment. Her name was called, and the applause felt like a tide lifting her from the depths of uncertainty. She stepped forward, bringing her story to life, infusing it with authenticity and humanity. As she spoke, the silence swelled, a contrast to the usual chatter of previous sessions, as if everyone was holding their breath, absorbed in her journey. But as she wrapped up, she could feel her heart hammering a familiar tune of anxiety. Would her voice resonate beyond this room? Would she continue to embrace her evolving self or retreat into silence once the spotlight dimmed? Those questions hung in the air as she walked off the stage, leaving her infused with exhilaration yet caught in a web of anticipation for what lay ahead. For the first time, instead of fearing the uncertainties, she craved the unknown. What revelations awaited? And was she brave enough to push through the limitations she had placed on herself? The days after the workshop blurred into a haze of both hope and trepidation. Sarah felt different. The applause had echoed long enough to reverberate through her thoughts, sparking a determination she had only glimpsed before. Yet the anxiety that shadowed her grew palpable, like a storm cloud hovering on the horizon. Every moment transformed into a test, demanding her to confront the specters of doubt that still lingered. In those pivotal weeks, Sarah focused on integrating what she had learned into her daily life. Each morning, she dedicated a portion of her journaling to unfolding new possibilities. "What if," she wrote, "I allowed myself to be seen beyond my fears?" The act of questioning became a catalyst for growth, forcing her to chip away at the stones surrounding her insecurities. For every stagnated thought, a new solution emerged, flashing at her like lighthouse beams piercing the fog. She decided to expand her engagements with storytelling. Rather than keeping the performances contained in her workshop, she volunteered to read at a local library event geared towards kids. Instinctively, she felt the weight of her childhood insecurities creeping in. Would they laugh at her? Would she falter in front of an audience again? Yet, juxtaposed against that fear was the potent image of a young girl in the audience just like herself who might find solace in her words. As the date approached, Sarah spent evenings crafting her story with a level of meticulous care she hadn't thought herself capable of before. The narrative became a tapestry of her past, intertwined with lessons of resilience. She infused it with the truthful edges of her vulnerabilities, offering a glimpse into the formative moments of her journey. The writing flowed effortlessly, each word echoed a visual of empowerment, aimed at those who might be struggling to find their voice, yet, doubt always seemed to slink back into her shadows. Each practice in front of the mirror revealed to her the physical manifestations of her anxiety. Would she tremble as she spoke? Would the voices in her head drown out the applause? Sarah confronted these questions head-on. A mantra formed: "Let my voice not just tell, but resonate." The day of the event arrived, grounding her in a whirlwind of anticipation. The library was bright, filled with excited children and families. As faces turned toward her, she felt a shift in electric current coursing through her, urging her to step forward. The platform felt like both a pedestal and an abyss, and that paradox tickled her heart with exhilaration. When she finally began, words poured from her as if they had been percolating just beneath the surface for ages. The initial tremors of vulnerability dissipated, replaced by a surge of connection. Eyes sparkled with recognition, smiles emerged. The children leaned in, captivated not merely by the story but by the essence of her experience, the real, raw Sarah sharing slices of herself with authenticity. But as she neared the climax of her narrative, she caught a glimpse of her own reflection in their eyes, a young girl who battled every day with what she perceived were insurmountable odds. Her story was not just a tale, it was a bridge that linked their worlds. A soft thrill coursed through her. Could this be her purpose? As she wrapped up the story, enveloped in a shroud of applause, an undeniable longing swelled within her. What were these children thinking? Did her voice resonate deeply enough to echo in their memories? Small faces danced in her mind, and with each second, she felt a deeper calling, a responsibility to forge ahead, enlightened and emboldened by her journey, yet simultaneously aware that this was merely the beginning. Stepping off the small stage, she was met with a rush of clarity. Each acknowledgement, each smile, fortified her resolve. Sarah could no longer question her worthiness. The true test lay ahead, forming connections that demanded vulnerability, confronting the stories yet untold that waited on her horizon. And just as the event concluded, a curious child approached her. With wide, earnest eyes. "Can you tell me another story?" The question resonated deeply. Indeed, she had countless stories to share. But as she prepared to respond, an unexpected notion struck her: was she truly ready to explore the depths of her own unwritten tales? As the little girl's question hung in the air, Sarah paused, feeling a mix of exhilaration and uncertainty coil inside her. Here was her audience, still curious and eager, yet her internal landscape felt tumultuous, populated with threats of self-doubt. Could she dive deeper into her own life's narratives, unearthing stories that bore the raw scars of inadequacy? Would they still hold the same charm for others? In the days that followed, Sarah increasingly felt the weight of her realization. The attention had stoked a fire within her, setting her on a path of self-exploration. Days bled into nights with relentless introspection. Each evening, as shadows deepened around her, Sarah found herself, once again, in the sanctuary of her journal. The pages beckoned her to revisit memories she had evaded, gently imploring her to confront the very emotions she had long buried. Who am I beyond the performance? She scribbled one night, her heart racing as she explored the question. This was daunting territory, where fear often lingered like a specter by her side. Yet with every stroke of the pen, pieces of herself, real, messy, vibrant, began to emerge. She recalled the heartbreak of rejection, the sting of failure, but more importantly, glimmers of hope woven through her experiences began to surface as well. Determined, she set aside her evenings to explore storytelling workshops focused on personal narratives. Among fellow creatives, she transformed her unease into a desire to connect. The warmth of encouragement enveloped her, often amplifying her sense of belonging. During exercises that pushed her to dig into her vulnerabilities, Sarah shared intimate pieces of her life moments she previously deemed unworthy. With each revelation, her confidence began to bloom. It wasn't merely about telling stories, it was about residing in them, diving into the thickets of life's complexities without fear, yet, confronting her past was never without struggle. The deeper she delved, the more anxiety protruded, revealing memories that rattled her. During one exercise, she recalled a defining moment from her childhood, a time she had been ridiculed for a clumsy performance in a school play. The shame had trailed behind her for years, whispering lies about her worth. Recounting it felt vulnerable enough to unearth her old ghosts. But there, in the intimacy of that workshop circle, she discovered her narrative had evolved. The story was no longer a source of shame, it was an emblem of resilience. I am still here, she declared softly as tears pooled in her eyes. Words of encouragement poured around her, fortifying her resolve. The old, self-critical voices began to lose their harshness, replaced by a burgeoning sense of acceptance. Drawing from the richness of these workshops, she began to structure her own narrative, merging her newfound confidence with compelling storytelling techniques. With every rewritten paragraph, she felt the stirrings of purpose. What had started as a bridge to connect with children was morphing into a tapestry of shared humanity, but just as she thought she grasped the essence of her path, a chilling doubt emerged, echoing in the corners of her mind. Was she ready for something as profound as publishing her story? The notion sent waves of apprehension coursing through her, dark shadows looming closer. As she awoke one morning, a familiar pit of unease settled in the depths of her stomach. It was time to test herself against the fear of vulnerability once more. A local publication sought submissions for personal essays, an opportunity that beckoned like a lighthouse against a tempest. Did she dare plunge into this uncharted territory? With her heart pounding, she understood, the moment had arrived to confront her biggest antagonist, not merely the past but the fear of being fully authentically, Sarah, unfiltered and raw. The stakes couldn't be higher. Would she seize this opportunity, or allow the shadows of self-doubt to silence her once again? Courage surged within Sarah as she wrote the title of her essay on the crisp sheet of paper, Embracing My Voice, A Journey Through Shadows. Each word felt like liberation, as if she were weaving together the very fibers of her identity. Months of introspection, storytelling workshops, and confrontations with her fears coalesced into this decisive moment. She felt invigorated, recognizing that sharing her journey through vulnerability wasn't just about achieving external recognition, it was about honoring the stories that had shaped her. Reminiscing on her past failures, the performance missteps, and the dismissive words of her peers, she reframed them as necessary lessons, not defining moments of worthlessness. With each keystroke, her confidence solidified not in the perfection of her prose but in the authenticity of her narrative. As the days passed, Sarah immersed herself in the essay. Lines about her childhood echoed like poetry through her mind, highlighting the delicate balance between insecurity and resilience. She reminded herself that her story was not just hers, it represented various figures who had faced insecurities and emerged victorious. She imagined their lives interwoven with her own, an unbroken chain of strength resonating through time. Finally, with a deep breath, Sarah clicked send. The act of submitting her essay felt like performing her first solo on stage, a leap into the unknown without guarantees. Yet there was a potent sense of achievement, a realization that this submission was more than just a piece of writing, it was a testament to her growth. Days turned into a suspenseful wait, but instead of falling back into doubt, Sarah filled her life with more storytelling opportunities. She volunteered at local schools, connecting with children through interactive storytelling sessions, infusing each story with her experiences, her laughter, and her mistakes. Each time a child's eyes widened with curiosity or joy, she understood the impact her journey had on nurturing young minds. They reflected the hope she craved to convey, the possibility of resilience against adversity. Then, one morning, an email notification jolted her from her thoughts. It was an acceptance letter from the publication her essay had been chosen. The exhilaration from that moment was profound. Sarah felt as if she had been lifted from a fugue state. Joy surged through her veins, filling every corner of her being with a fierce hope. The echoes of her past no longer haunted her, transforming instead into melodies that told her story beautifully. The day of publication arrived, and she shared the news with excitement mixed with nerves. As her friends congratulated her, she felt their pride in her accomplishments. It became clear, she had transformed her narrative from one of self-doubt to one of empowerment. The applause she received was no longer just about external validation, it came from within, resonating with the core of her identity. Sarah's journey culminated in an invitation to a local writers' panel, where she was asked to speak about her experiences in storytelling and personal narratives. Stepping onto that stage, her heart raced, but this time she was armed with an unwavering sense of purpose. "I stand before you," she began, "not just as a writer but as a woman who claimed her voice after too long being silent." It felt exhilarating as she shared the intricacies of vulnerability and the beauty of resilience, how every setback, every voice of doubt ever cast upon her had only fueled her fire. With each word spoken, she felt lighter, freer. This was a culmination of her journey, not just about overcoming obstacles but also about living authentically. She saw her journey reflected in the faces of those listening, a tapestry woven from countless shared stories, the essence of human connection manifested through storytelling. As she left the stage, greeted with applause and admiration, a newfound clarity took root in her. No longer did she see herself as a mere observer in the world of academia, she had solidified her position as an influential voice. She realized that her journey was not over, rather, it was just beginning, and her aspirations now included a future filled with more stories to share. This was her moment, a resounding affirmation, a solid confidence and recognized competence. Sarah knew one thing above all else: she had not only conquered her fears, she had demonstrated that being authentic, vulnerable, and brave was the epitome of true success. Now was the time to embrace every layer of herself, flaws, strengths, and intricate stories, teaching others that resilience was not merely a concept but a lived reality. If you followed Sarah's incredible journey, now is the moment to show your support. Subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss more exclusive emotional stories, leave a like now to feed the algorithm and help us grow, comment below your reactions and theories about Sarah's ending. Your voice matters. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to witness this transformative conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to spread inspiration.